Chapter 7. Hundreds of Wishes. June came with its long, endless rains. Day after day the sky was gray as rain spattered against the windows. Rain dripped steadily from the leaves of the maple tree. Soon everything in the room smelled musty. Even the sheets felt clammy. Sadako grew pale and listless, and only her parents and Masashiro were allowed to visit her. The bamboo class sent a kokeshi doll to cheer her up. Sadako liked the wooden doll's wistful smile and the red roses painted on its kimono. The doll stood next to the golden crane on Sadako's bedside table. Mrs. Sasaki was worried because Sadako didn't eat enough. One morning she brought a surprise wrapped in a furoshiki bundle. It contained all of Sadako's favorite foods, an egg roll, chicken and rice, pickled plums, and bean cakes. Sadako propped herself up against the pillows and tried to eat. But it was no use. Her swollen gums hurt so much that she couldn't chew. Finally, Sadako pushed the good things away. Her mother's eyes were bright as if she were going to cry. "I'm such a turtle," Sadako burst out. She was angry with herself for making her mother sad. She also knew that the Sasaki family had no extra money for expensive food. Tears stung Sadako's eyes, and she quickly brushed them away. "It's all right," Mrs. Sasaki said soothingly. She cradled Sadako in her arms. "You'll be better soon. Maybe when the sun comes out again." Sadako leaned against her mother and listened to her read from a book of poems. When Masashiro came, Sadako was calmer and happier. He told her news from school and ate some of the special dinner. Before Masashiro left, he said, "Oh, I almost forgot. Iji sent you a present," and he dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of silver paper. "Here," he said, giving it to his sister. "Iji said this is for another crane." Sadako sniffed the paper. Smells like candy," she said. "I hope the gods like chocolate." The three burst out laughing. It was the first time Sadako had laughed in days. It was a good sign. Perhaps the golden crane's magic was beginning to work. She smoothed out the paper and folded a bird. 541. But she was too tired to make more. Sadako stretched out on the bed and closed her eyes. And as Mrs. Sasaki tiptoed out of the room, she whispered a poem she used to say when Sadako was little. "O flock of heavenly cranes, cover my child with your wings." Chapter 8. Last Days. Near the end of July, it was warm and sunny. Sadako seemed to be getting better. "I'm over halfway to 1,000 cranes," she told Masashiro, "so something good is going to happen." And it did. Her appetite came back, and much of the pain went away. Dr. Numata was pleased with her progress and told Sadako she could go home for a visit. That night, Sadako was so excited she couldn't sleep. To keep the magic working, she made more cranes. 621, 622. It was wonderful to be home with the family for Obon, the biggest holiday of the year. Obon was a special celebration for spirits of the dead who had returned to visit those they had loved on earth. Mrs. Sasaki and Mitsu had scrubbed and swept the house until it shone. Fresh flowers brightened the table. Sadako's golden crane and kokeshi doll were there too. The air was filled with smells of delicious holiday food. Dishes of bean cakes and rice balls had been placed on the altar shelf for ghostly visitors. That night, Sadako watched her mother put a lantern outside so that the spirits could find their way in the dark. She let out a happy sigh. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was home to stay. For several days, a steady stream of friends and relatives come to call on the Sasaki family. By the end of a week, Sadako was pale and tired again. She could only sit quietly and watch the others. "Sadako certainly has good manners now," Mr. Sasaki said. "Oba-chan's spirit must be pleased to see how ladylike her granddaughter has become." "How can you say that?" Mrs. Sasaki cried. "I would rather have our lively Sadako back." She dabbed her eyes and hurried into the kitchen. "I'm making everyone sad," Sadako thought. She wished she could suddenly turn into her old self. How happy her mother would be then. As if she knew what was in Sadako's mind, her father said gruffly, "There now, don't worry. After a good night's rest, you'll feel fine." But the next day, Sadako had to return to the hospital. For the first time, she was glad to be in the quiet hospital room. Her parents sat behind the bed for a long time. Every now and then, Sadako drifted off into a strange kind of half-sleep. "When I die," she said dreamily, "will you put my favorite bean cakes on the altar for my spirit?" Mrs. Sasaki could not speak. She took her daughter's hand and held it tightly. Hush, Mr. Sasaki said in a funny voice. That will not happen for many, many years. Don't give up now, Sadako-chan. You have to make only a few hundred more cranes. Nurse Yasunanga gave Sadako medicine that helped her rest. Before her eyes closed, Sadako reached out to touch the golden crane. I will get better, she murmured to the Kokeshi doll, and someday I'll race like the wind. From then on, Dr. Numata gave Sadako blood transfusions or shots almost every day. I know it hurts, he said, but we must keep on trying. Sadako nodded. She never complained about the shots and almost constant pain. A bigger pain was growing deep inside of her. It was the fear of dying. She had to fight it as well as the disease. The golden crane helped. It reminded Sadako that there was always hope. Mrs. Sasaki spent more and more time at the hospital. Every afternoon, Sadako listened for the familiar slap-slap of her plastic slippers in the hall. All visitors had to put on yellow slippers at the door, but Mrs. Sasaki's made a special sound. Sadako's heart ached to see her mother's face so lined with worry. The leaves on the maple tree were turning rust and gold when the family came for one last visit. Iji handed Sadako a big box wrapped in gold paper and tied with a red ribbon. Slowly, Sadako opened it. Inside was something her mother had always wanted for her, a silk kimono with cherry blossoms on it. Sadako felt hot tears blur her eyes. Why did you do it? She asked, touching the soft cloth. I'll never be able to wear it, and silk costs so much money. Sadako-chan, her father said gently, your mother stayed up late last night to finish sewing it. Try it on for her. With a great effort, Sadako lifted herself out of bed. Mrs. Sasaki helped her put on the kimono and tie a sash. Sadako was glad her swollen legs didn't show. Unsteadily, she limped across the room and sat in her chair by the window. Everyone agreed that she was like a princess in the kimono. At that moment, Shizuko came in. Dr. Numata had given her permission to visit for a short time, and she stared at Sadako in surprise. You look better in that outfit than in school clothes, she said. Everyone laughed, even Sadako. Then, I'll wear it to classes every day when I'm well again, she joked. Mitsu and Iji giggled at the idea. For a while, it was almost like the good times they used to have at home. They played word games and sang Sadako's favorite songs. Meanwhile, she sat stiffly in the chair, trying not to show the pain it caused her, but it was worth the pain. When her parents left, they looked almost cheerful. Before she went to sleep, Sadako managed to fold only one paper crane. 644. It was the last one she ever made. Chapter 9, Racing with the Wind. As Sadako grew weaker, she thought more about death. Would she live on a heavenly mountain? Did it hurt to die, or was it like falling asleep? If only I could forget about it, Sadako thought, but it was like trying to stop the rain from falling. As soon as she concentrated on something else, death crept back into her mind. Toward the middle of October, Sadako lost track of the days and nights. Once when she was awake, she saw her mother crying. Don't cry, she begged. Please don't cry. Sadako wanted to say more, but her mouth and tongue wouldn't move. A tear slid down her cheek. She had brought her mother so much grief, and all Sadako could do now was make paper cranes and hope for a miracle. She fumbled with a piece of paper. Her fingers were too clumsy to fold it. I can't even make a crane, she said to herself. I've turned into a real turtle. Quickly, Sadako tried with all her strength to fold the paper before she was swept into darkness. It might have been minutes or hours later that Dr. Numata came in and felt Sadako's forehead. He gently took the paper out of her hands, and she barely heard him say, It's time to rest. You can make more birds tomorrow. Sadako gave a faint nod. Tomorrow. Tomorrow seemed like such a long way off. The next time she awoke, the family was there. Sadako smiled at them. She was part of that warm, loving circle where she would always be. Nothing would ever change that. Already, lights were dancing behind her eyes. Sadako slid a thin, trembling hand over to touch the golden crane. Life was slipping away from her, but the crane made Sadako feel stronger inside, and she looked at her flock hanging from the ceiling. As she watched, a light autumn breeze made the birds rustle and sway. They seemed to be alive and flying out through the open window. How beautiful and free they were. Sadako sighed and closed her eyes. She never woke up. Epilogue. Sadako Sasaki died on October 25, 1955. Her classmates folded 355 cranes so that 1,000 were buried with Sadako. In a way, she got her wish. She will live on in the hearts of people for a long time. After the funeral, the bamboo class collected Sadako's letters and published them in a book. They called it Kokeshi after the doll they had given to Sadako while she was in the hospital. The book was sent around Japan, and soon everyone knew about Sadako and her 1,000 paper cranes. Sadako's friends began to dream of building a monument to her and all children who were killed by the atom bomb. Young people throughout the country helped collect money for the project. Finally, their dream came true in 1958. The statue was unveiled in the Hiroshima Peace Park. There is Sadako standing on top of a granite mountain of paradise. She is holding a golden crane in an outstretched hands. A folded crane club was organized in her honor. Members still place thousands of paper cranes beneath Sadako's statue on August 6th, Peace Day. They make a wish too. Their wish is engraved in the base of the statue. This is our cry. This is our prayer. Peace in the world. The end.